I was reading about you, and I was curious how you got into filmmaking, because if I understand correctly, you've never really been a cinephile.
Well, I think that when I first started getting into filmmaking, I watched everything I could get my hands on. I think I came pretty late to it, and once I did, I consumed so much. My first year in film school, I went to film school in Italy, and that first year we had this really wonderful library at the school, and I don't know how many movies I saw, but it was a day. And I think from there I watched so much, and then kind of stopped watching them.
Yeah. What I mean, there is a danger of this, because especially in this culture, I think, when we can pull up any movie we want at any time, where filmmakers from decades ago, I mean, they went on the memories they had of certain scenes, and that's really all they had. But I think there's a tendency to kind of take so much from what you've seen that in a way you're not even making your own movie. You're just pulling inspirations from all other films and kind of mixing them together. I mean, is that a worry for you at all, or a consideration?
I mean, I remember around that time as well, as when I was much younger, reading Nietzsche and reading that when he wrote, he never read anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so as not to influence his own writing. And I think that the types of films that I watch and kind of enjoy now are more popcorn fare, big blockbusters. I'll go to the movie and just sort of enjoy Batman or Spider-Man.
Right.
Because I like that it transports me to the unfamiliar. Whereas I think with sort of the smaller films, these are at least emotions and circumstances that I have access to in my own life.
Well, with War Story, where did the inspiration start from there? I mean, have you always been fascinated by kind of photojournalism in a war setting?
It was. I arrived at it in a pretty roundabout way. Well, first of all, it's part of a trilogy. It's the second installment of a trilogy that's set on islands that deals with grief and loss and guilt and forging a new path out of that. And that the first film I shot was Without, and that was on an island in the Northwest off the coast of Washington State, where I'm from. And the inspiration for that film was cyberbullying, was anti-gay cyberbullying, which is not, and it's told from the survivor's perspective, so it's not something that you would really understand as the inspiration for that piece. And then the second installment, it really started with an interest in the resourcefulness of women when they are faced with limited access to reproductive health services. When I was living in Italy, through friends, understood that Italy had these extremely restrictive abortion laws, and then doing research on that and understanding that I wanted to somehow treat that, somehow deal with that. And so that was kind of the first kernel of this story that presented itself.
Oh. Do you recognize in yourself why you're drawn to those themes?
Well, I think that I'm fascinated with resourcefulness, and I'm fascinated with I have great admiration for resourcefulness and our resilience, our human resilience, and the face of trauma.
Mm-hmm. And so when my understanding is that you wrote this with Catherine in mind. When you're writing it, what was your motive, and how were you trying to kind of shed a different light on her particular gifts with what you were writing?
I was just reflecting on this today. I was thinking, what drew me to Catherine. I think that she's such a great voice, such a remarkable speaking voice, and she has such a beautiful smile and a wonderful laugh. And I was realizing that, I made this, or I understood it as I was writing that I was making a film in which she barely talks and she does not laugh once, and she only half smiles with her closed mouth twice. And I think there's sort of this, I guess, a block that I feel with writing fiction, or I feel like there's this. Do you remember when Al Pacino was in Any Given Sunday, and
yes,
he was just Al Pacino in Any Given Sunday, and even if it was a great performance, he was just Al Pacino, and I feel like
I'm the world's biggest Al Pacino fan, so yes, I know everything he did at Any Given Sunday. Yes,
I mean it's remarkable, and I think Keener is such a one of the most gifted actors out there as well, and to sort of take away what we understand Catherine Keener to be, this great gravelly voice, this infectious laugh, this beautiful smile, sort of take that away, the Catherine Keener that we know, and instead have her be something different.
Right. No, that's a fascinating dynamic, because years ago when Alexander Payne did About Schmidt, I mean, he wanted Nicholson badly for it, and Nicholson comes with all of these personality traits that are so distinctly Nicholson, and his motive was to strip him of all of that and see what transpired from that dynamic. So yeah, it is fascinating. But what strikes me about your filmmaking style is just the level of lived-in intimacy that you establish with the character and the setting. So I'm curious what your approach is to camera, how the camera plays into that and facilitates that.
Well, I write specifically for a location and specifically for an actor, and so I'm I was very familiar with that space, with that town, with that hotel, and having seen all of Catherine's movies, I'm very well versed in what she looks like in all her different emotional states, and so from there it's and because this is a film that treats that deals with a photojournalist, and it was the same style that I employed in Without, is this kind of breathing stills, these long takes that allow an emotion to unfurl.
Yeah. What is it in her, or anyone that goes into that line of work, photojournalism and in war-torn or very volatile regions? What is it in them that draws them to that particular line of work, do you think?
Catherine spent a good amount of time with the folks over at the LA Times as she was researching this role. I know she got really close to them, and this, I think that there's a desire to help. I think that they're drawn. Mm-hmm. I think first and foremost, it's an impulse to be of service.
Yeah.
And it's a very noble pursuit.
And by their very nature, I mean, they have to have some kind of reserve of resilience. I mean, to go through what they and to see the things that they see, and to still find the importance of the mission of what they're doing. Just in terms of a kind of a writer director, geeky thing. How fulfilling was it to see actors like Ben Kingsley and Catherine Keener working on the scenes that you wrote? I mean, that must have been elating for you.
Sure, it was. Those scenes with them were, just watching two titans clash. It was. I felt like the luckiest guy in the world. It was, and to add to the matters, it was at the family there is like my adopted family, and we shot it in their living room, and and I had actually written. I'd written in my name into the script as a joke. That's her partner. I named him Mark, but just as between Catherine and I, as we were going back and forth on the script, and she kind of latched onto that name and didn't want to change it, and Sir Ben certainly didn't want to change it. So I'd never intended to call that character Mark. So it was also, another level of it to hear Sir Ben, yelling my name.
Yeah. But it's fascinating to me too, because when you work with such great actors, and you talked about Catherine doing her own research and kind of delving into that world, you live with it in script form for so long, and you have it in your mind what it's going to be. But when they bring flesh and blood to it, what surprised you about these characters as they brought them to life?
Well, I was so fortunate just across the board, not just Catherine. I think Hafsia Herzi is so tremendously gifted, and Vincenzo Amato and Donatello Finocchiaro are like two of my favorite Italian actors as well. Even Guido Caprino, who plays the doctor in a small scene, they're all the people that I really wanted for this film. So it's. I guess what I try to do is, I really feel like you can prepare as much as possible. You can spend a lot of time writing, but I don't think that anything will really compares to what the idea is that can present itself to you in the moment. So I guess for me, the script is a structure, a framework through which to work, and we just try to stay as open as possible to the suggestions and ideas of the moment. Catherine and I really did work that way. It was just a constant dialogue between the two of us.
Is that particularly challenging when you're working on an independent film with a more limited budget, to where you have to make certain days and you're racing against the clock? Is it a particular challenge to leave yourself open to those moments of surprise and discovery?
I think it's counterbalanced by how few shots there are in the film. Mm-hmm. That the bulk of the film, the scenes are just one shot. So that allowed us to, whereas normally you'd have to get through multiple setups in a day. Even if we're shooting 4 scenes, maybe there's only 6 different setups. So that was kind of designed as well with this process in mind.
And you say that this is an island trilogy, so you're already cooking up the third part?
Yes. Yeah, the third one is going to be set in Vietnam, in a little island off Vietnam called Phu Quoc, and it's home to a lot of the fish sauce factories that come out of Vietnam. Some of the finest fish sauce comes out of there, as well as one of the grisliest POW camps in the war.
Mm. So, these 3 movies take place at really kind of diverse locations. and you get a sense that you're very worldly. I mean, where did this exposure to these different regions come for you?
Well, I grew up with my grandparents were Italian, and so I understood that at some point wanted to go to Italy, and I think I would credit that time in Italy as a young man, being exposed to because there's so many different tourists that go to school there and study there. That I was exposed to people from all over, and so from there I really formed friendships and ended up traveling around and living in various corners of the world.
Yeah. And finally, I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned that you find yourself watching the big tentpole movies, like the Batman movies, that sort of thing.
Right.
And if somebody came to you tomorrow and offered you a job to direct one of those, would you be receptive to it?
I mean, I watched Batman, the last Batman, and I cried 7 times during it, and I feel like that's it's a different medium. I think a good friend of mine watched War Story and was still in a rough cut, and he hated it, and he said, I don't know what that was, but whatever it wasn't narrative, and he said maybe it's like a tone poem, maybe it's too dark. And I think it just feels like it's a different thing than what I do.
Do you? That's an interesting thing too, because I mean a lot of my friends feel that story and narrative are everything, and I always think that movies are capable of so much more, and it's like what you said, a tone poem. I mean, they can kind of give you a sense of something that transcends traditional narrative. And I mean, I started getting that when I delved into Kubrick many years ago, and I felt that in a large part from his work too. But I mean, so is that common for you? Do you find that resistance a lot?
I think if you look at War Story, it has. If you look just at a synopsis of it, and I think it's being billed as a thriller, but it is, it's nothing of the sort. It's, for me, it's like an action movie after the action has stopped. Mm. And I think but if you just looked at the synopsis, it's a war photographer who's held captive. She's coming back to Sicily to hole up and deal with that trauma, and she meets a young Tunisian woman who she thinks needs her help, and she sees a shot at redemption. Like that for me is, that's like capital M movie type of material. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I think, just I guess the anti-narrative part of it is that, the idea that she could find redemption through helping this young woman is false. Like that, this young woman doesn't even actually need her help. And it's really only, in her vulnerability, she's ignoring what she certainly knows, because she's a highly intelligent, capable professional, that there's no easy answers. And so I guess in a traditional movie, they would meet each other and they would form this unlikely friendship, and they would, heal each other, and then that would be the end of the movie. They'd part, but it'd be really hard. And that's not what happens at all. Like rather than having this fulfilling narrative, I'm where this mourning is kind of recovered from. I'm happy to just have made the first step. If Lee just makes the first step in that process of getting of a very long process of dealing with the trauma and getting over this grief, then I think that's appropriate for 90 minutes, not that she's all better.